For more than a year, we've been witnessing a big financial drama in Heroic, FaZe, and many other top teams. One might think that these guys are completely safe from any financial struggles. They're strong teams, get invites to S-tier tournaments, and receive huge paychecks from stickers. But in practice, these teams have had problems so serious that they've had to fight for their literal survival. But why is that? Why do so many teams, even FaZe and Heroic, experience so many financial struggles? Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, because you're watching CYBERSHOKE, and today we'll try to uncover why FaZe Clan and Heroic almost went bankrupt, and why Team Spirit is a very clever org. CYBERSHOKE is the biggest training project in CS2. We have 25 different game modes, and we're sure you're going to get hooked on at least one of those. Also, do check out our premium subscription, which lets you get random skin drops, do weekly tasks, and play with streamers. We also have special events for our premium players, like the Pick'em Challenge with a prize wheel. We'll leave a link in the description. So before we dive deep into Heroic and FaZe's problems, let's try to find out why so many big orgs have a lot of financial problems in the first place. So here's the thing. Professionally speaking, esports is a soap bubble that gets bigger and bigger each year. Rich people invest a lot of money in esports, not for a quick profit, but rather to gain a foothold in this market. Of course, their investments mainly go to big organizations, because their business model is incredibly simple. If an org manages to gather a strong roster that will win tournaments and attract sponsors, then they're doing a good job. This kind of scheme is very easy to understand. So, orgs get a huge cash flow that grows every year. And the main asset of any organization is its players. So it's no wonder why their salaries grow exponentially each year. Just think about it. Only 15 years ago, the best players in the world were making about $2,000 a month, and we're happy about it. They flew economy, staying in budget hotels, arranging boot camps in apartments, and didn't even think of complaining about it. But nowadays, ZywOo earns 100,000 euros a month. I mean, that's more than all of Fnatic won at the first CSGO major. So now, here we are, and it seems big organizations have forgotten how to be profitable. Yeah, sponsorship deals make some money for them, but that's not even enough to cover salaries. So as a result, many teams just live on the cash that keeps flowing from investors, with a hope of making profits someday in the future. And here's the big problem with that. Imagine that you were the owner of an organization like this. You've got a strong Tier 1 team, good sponsors, and many fans around the world. Obviously, your players are constantly getting offers for 20 or even 30,000 euros a month, so you've got to at least keep up with that. And so, in order to stay afloat, you take money from investors. And let's just assume that everything's going swimmingly until one day, life's unpredictability comes knocking on the door, and your players have a fight with each other, or maybe the world has some shakeup due to economic or political crises. Well, there's even a rumor that a major winning team had to kick a player because he slept with his teammate's girlfriend. You get the point. You're not insured from all the random crap that could happen to you. So in this case, your organization, even as big and successful as it is, could easily collapse in just a month or two. And that's why esports gets called a soap bubble. By 2022, FaZe became such a big organization that they had to spend $59 million a year. And there was a bit of a problem with that. The money wasn't enough to cover all their expenses. And to top it all off, they made some questionable choices with it. For instance, one time they agreed to shoot a video with Lil Yachty, but then FaZe's management randomly decided to do the shooting date a bit sooner than originally scheduled, which Yachty responded with by asking for double the price. And surprisingly, FaZe just went for it, with no one able to explain why they paid Yachty double the money just to shoot that video a little bit earlier. Also, FaZe loved to spend big bucks on rental properties. By 2021, their spendings on rent reached $1,500,000. Mostly it was villas for residents. In July of the same year, they held a private party in San Diego for just $1,700,000. And then there was the case where FaZe made a deal with Snoop Dogg in March 2022 and gave him a few million in shares and a seat on the board in hopes that he would promote the organization and publish a lot of content with it to make profits on the shares. But they made a little miscalculation there. Instead of engaging in a long-term relationship with tons of hard work, Snoop Dogg just took his money and left within a year. These big missteps couldn't go on forever, and so at the beginning of 2022, people began talking about financial problems at FaZe. The situation got so bad that FaZe had a chance of losing all of its money within just a few months. In the end, the owners of FaZe had to initiate a SPAC process, which is basically where they set up an empty company and get investors on board, allowing the firm to enter the financial market without actually doing any business. The goal is then to merge this big and empty firm with another, smaller organization like FaZe Clan, and thus help it get to the market where it can publicly sell shares. Put another way, FaZe were able to enter NASDAQ because they merged with a company that was stuffed full of money from investors. At that moment, FaZe's worth was estimated at about $725 million. Remember this number, we'll go back to it later. So FaZe were now almost a billion-dollar company. It looked like all their financial problems were gone. But no. You see, when one creates a SPAC company, its investors actually don't know where the money will eventually go. The only thing you can rely on when investing in projects like this is the honesty of its organizer. But sadly, when the people whose money was used to help FaZe enter NASDAQ found out where their capital ended up, they were disappointed and they started to return their money, which dropped FaZe's shares from $20 way down to 40 cents in less than 6 months. Moreover, some brands started to back down from working with FaZe due to some reputational risk. Here's what Grant Patterson said about it. "I can't think of a brand I've ever worked with that would look at FaZe Clan right now and think, well, if they offer us a really good deal, maybe let's go for it. The basic brand safety and reputational considerations will just make that totally prohibitive. So clearly, they've got to get their house in order and try to sort out the issues that they face before seeing if there's a commercial opportunity to grow their business through partnerships again." As a result, FaZe had to leave NASDAQ because their shares became too cheap. After failing to restore the share price to at least $1, FaZe started the expensive procedure of delisting. And at the same time, some partners now refuse to prolong sponsorship deals with the org. Remember that number, $725 million that we pointed out earlier? That was an estimate of FaZe's worth in the summer of 2022. Well, less than a year later, the org was sold for just $17 million to GameSquare. The new bosses desperately wanted to get everything back on track. They started by restructuring the business, leaving behind 40% of the former employees. There is one more organization that's been in a similar situation with no money left but still needing to pay salaries. In March 2023, about a year ago, the guys had two options. They either had to find the money they need or the whole company gets shut down. And after counting all the money they had left, Heroic came to the conclusion that they would need at least $7,500,000 in order to stay afloat until 2025. It was unclear, however, how they planned to get that money. First, they asked their existing investors to give them more money in exchange for shares. Heroic managed to raise $1 million this way, which was just enough to keep things together until the Paris Major in May, and the Norwegian org managed to successfully bring their team to Paris, where it reached the semifinals, and during that very tournament, Heroic sold the organization. The buyer was a private investment fund called Crow Bidco AS, and no journalist was able to find any decent information on these guys. The only thing we know is that the org was sold for $5,500,000. And you may be asking, so what? The owner realized that they most likely wouldn't be able to raise another $6 million, so he sold the org. But here's the thing. There's a rumor that the actual buyer of Heroic was none other than the bookmaker 1xBet. A journalist, Corentin Fallop, released a big investigation on ties between 1xBet and the new owners of Heroic. Corentin dug deep into the public logs of Cypriot companies, the 2017 document leak, and some LinkedIn profiles. Here are some of his findings. Under Crow Bidco, the new owner of Heroic, there were 3 employees of interest, whose names you now see on the screen. Yevgenia Akolsina was the secretary of that firm. Yevgenia led the journalist to the company called SL Consult Agency, where she also worked as a secretary. Its director was Dmitry Grigoriev, one of the board members in Heroic Group. Also, Yevgenia led Corentin to another company called Capsbold, which had two top managers in common with Heroic's new owner, Krobidko. And do you know what Capsbold was called before it was renamed? Nine Pandas. For those that don't know, Nine Pandas is a Russian org that was supposedly tied to 1xBet. Again, you might ask, so what? Even if all that's true, what's the harm in 1x buying Heroic? Well, we're not going to make any moral judgments here, but the problem lies here in a simple conflict of interests, because 1xBet also appears to be one of the main ESL partners. And if this information gets proven, then Heroic won't be able to attend any ESL tournaments. And of course, they wouldn't want that to happen. But we want to make it clear that we're not saying that this investigation is 100% true. But for us, the sole fact that such an article exists does say a lot. That last year of Heroics, it was still a stable top 5 team getting great results. And then it got sold to some private fund with no information about its owners. And then there's FaZe Clan, whose value dropped down by a factor of 40 in just 1 year. These are both prime examples of the effect of the esports soap bubble, which analysts have been talking about for years now. But are there any teams who have somehow managed to avoid these problems? For sure there are. In CS2, it's the orgs who have success in scouting talents and developing academies. Not many people know this, but Team Spirit actually binds a lot of young prospects with contracts, giving them a salary. Then later, when these guys turn out to be a new generation of pros, Spirit is able to sell them for lots of money or promote them to the main roster. For instance, the whole Navi Junior project was paid off by a single Monacy to G2 deal. Esports is a very young market with a lot of money. Here you can earn a quick fortune or lose everything in the blink of an eye. Like in our video about Flashpoint, where we talked about how a dozen investors lost $2 million each trying to create new teams. If you enjoyed this type of video and you want to see more esports financial content in the future, please make sure to leave a like and drop a comment. Bye for now.